Okay. Okay, you just asked a great question, Lindsey. Repeat the question before I answer
All
it all.
right. When is it too early to do a regulatory pathways analysis?
The answer is it's never too early. In fact, you should do it before anybody gives you any money and before you even incorporate your business. In fact, as an investor in startup medical device companies, I wouldn't give anybody any of my money until I have that answer. Now, being a regulatory consultant, I can look it up. I don't even trust what they say. But if I wasn't a regulatory consultant, that's the first thing I would insist on is who's the regulatory consultant that already put in writing this is the regulatory pathway, and have we done our due diligence to make sure they know what they're talking about?
Nice.
Because if you don't know how much it's going to cost, you don't know what the pathway is, and you don't know how long it's going to take, why am I giving you any of my money? And what we
Perfect.
see is companies come to us like, we're almost done with the design of the device. Could you tell us what the pathway is? I'm like, what? And I don't react that way on the call with them because we're trying to engage them as a consultant. And I don't want to tell them they're crazy, but what did you just say? You said you're almost done with your development. You want to know now what the pathway is? And we actually have seen companies come to us with a class 2 device that they think is a class 1. So they thought it was exempt. They just want help registering and they actually need a 510K. We've seen companies with class 3 devices come to us say, I need help with a 510K, and it's really a class 3 that needs a PMA and a clinical study. We've also seen companies come to us, they thought they needed help with a 510K, and it was really an exempt device that they could have been selling for the last 6 months. And so if all those scenarios have come to us for real with real companies, that means there are a lot of people out there that are really smart, some of them with PhDs and MDs, some people with both that have
Mhm.
made this mistake. This is not a trivial decision. You need somebody to walk you through. Here's the proof. Here's your competitor product. Here's how they're registered. Here's their 510K. This is the regulation. This is the testing plan. Here's the guidance document. So a testing plan and a regulatory pathway are table stakes for getting any money and incorporating your business. Now, might it evolve over time? Might it get tweaked and reworded? Might you think of a feature to add that might change the answer? Sure. But companies will have like version 1.0. Eric Ries talks about the minimum viable product. It's the introductory product. It's version 1.0. That's a straightforward pathway usually. Then version 2.0 might have a feature added that pushed it into a de novo. Or it might be another 510K. That's the things that evolve over time. But every single one of the companies that comes to us that asks that question, the answer should be you should have a regulatory pathway documented and double checked with somebody that knows what they're talking about. And you should have a preliminary testing plan before you develop your product and before you accept money from investors. And people are like, how can I come up with a testing plan ahead of time? Like, is it going to be powered? Then you need electrical safety. Is it going to be powered? You're going to need EMC testing. Is it going to have software? Then you're going to need to do software validation. This isn't hard. I'm not saying that you need the complete protocol and you need to have it signed off and approved. I'm just saying you need to have a rough idea that am I going to have to spend $50,000-$60,000 on electrical safety testing or not? Yes or
Mhm.
no? Do I need an extra 50-60 grand from investors? Yes or no? That's
Mhm.
all. And so if you haven't asked early before you got any money, before you did incorporation, you're too late already. That doesn't mean we won't help you. It just means you're behind schedule and you need to catch up.
Okay, so now what if somebody thinks they have a de novo, should they do a 513G?
If somebody thinks they have a de novo, okay, we're a regulatory consulting firm, not an individual, a firm with a whole bunch of people working with experts in their field developing devices. And last year we had 2 de novos that the FDA said these are de novos. We submitted the de novos and then the FDA changed their mind and said they were 510Ks. So if we got it wrong, the company got it wrong, and the FDA got it wrong, it's not a trivial question about whether they need to do a 513G or not. The answer when I spoke with Peter Yang was, what should we have done here? What could we have done wrong? The answer was, you should have done a 513G. You only did a pre-sub based on the information we had. We agreed, but we really can't spend the time at the FDA to make a complete, absolute decision on whether it's a de novo or a 510K unless we do a 513G. And what I have learned is that when you do a 513G, they have minimum requirements: device description, labeling, instruction for use. But if you give somebody the minimum, be careful what you get back. So we revised our proposal, if you remember, Lindsey. Now it's $6,000 instead of $3,000. That's not because I wanted to charge twice as much. It's because I realized the stuff that we do differently for the de novo really needs to be done earlier, so we don't have that ever happen again. So
And if you go through the whole process of 510K and they say it's actually, or if you go through the whole process de novo and it's actually 510K, you're making all the payments all over again. So you're spending more money than you got to.
One company got lucky and the FDA realized their mistake before the submission was accepted, and we were able to withdraw and get the refund. The other company was not so lucky. The FDA accepted it and then changed their mind. So that company lost their 36 grand.
Yeah, that's a big, mess up, so to speak.
And that I had in writing, like, you sure you don't want to do a 513 just to make sure? Nope, we want to go ahead. And the FDA sounded really confident. So everybody felt comfortable with the decision, but it wasn't right. So a mistake was made. But who's to blame?
Right.
So in that situation, what you need to do is, when you're risking 36 grand, yeah, you don't want to do a 513G because you don't want to wait 60 days and you don't want to pay the money, but it's an insurance policy against that mistake. So if you're going to pay it, if you're going to pay the insurance policy, we're also going to charge you more money for the 513G than we used to, because now all the documents that we would be different. There are 4 documents, I think, that are different. We actually provide those 4 documents with the minimum requirements in a 513G. So the FDA can't say we didn't give them every single bit of information they could have, because it's basically all the things that would be in a de novo that would not be in a 510K. We provided you. We provided you all our efforts to identify a potential predicate. We provided all the information that you need about alternative procedures and techniques that could be used. We provided you a benefit risk analysis based on what clinical literature is out there, because you normally haven't done a clinical study yet. And then another thing is we actually provided a classification, recommendation, and rationale. So those are the key things that we're trying to provide the FDA. So we're not only saying we think it's a de novo, we think it's a de novo under this regulation. We think it's going to be this subpart, this number. We suggest a name now. We never did that before. So that's a lot more detail than we ever provided before. And it doesn't take us a lot of time, an extra half hour to come up with a name, a descriptive name, and propose a number. Why? Because that way the FDA is thinking, yeah, I agree. That's what we would have it as. That's where it belongs. That's how it would be regulated. And we even provide a risk mitigation table. So they list all the risks. And then in the column next to it, they put all the mitigations that should be in place. They're really risk controls, but the FDA likes to use the word mitigation. So that table we also provide. So all these things that you would normally only have in a de novo, we provide to them in a 513G as drafts. So the FDA can say thumbs up, we agree it's a de novo, or they can say, no, we disagree, it's a 510K, and here's why. It's 6 grand you're paying, but none of it was wasted, because we've given the FDA all the information they need. So if they decide it's a de novo, then you've already prepared those documents and we don't have to prepare them again. We might revise them a little bit, like the benefit risk with some new clinical data, but we're not going to edit them, or we're not going to delete them. It's not wasted time and money. We're not going to charge you twice for it. And then on the other side, if they decide it's a 510K, they just saved you $30,000, because that's the difference between a 510K and a de novo. So you can say we cost you the extra $3,000 creating documents you didn't need, but you could also say we saved you $30,000 from going down the wrong pathway. So,
Right.
you
So
know,
you
half
said it was
full, half empty. Which kind of person are you?
you said it was 60 days if you do the 513G, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to stop your work. We still work on the testing plan. We still get you quotes. You can still start your testing. You just aren't going to submit until you have that answer. So we're still going to use an E-star. We're still going to need a device description. We still need labeling. We still need human factors. Still need all that testing. Nothing slows down. It goes in parallel with the freight train. So we're just,
My big
before we submit, tell us which kind of submission and how much to pay.
So my question was, okay, so if you decide not to do that 513G, right? And you decide, you know what, we're just going to go for it. How long would that set you back in time versus just had you just done the 60-day 513G?
What ended up happening for both clients, they both were delayed about 6 months. The first company, they already got their 510K cleared, and the second one is in the AI stage.
That's literally a 4-month difference.
They both lost 6 months. The one company that already got their 510K, ironically, I prepared the whole 510K in parallel with the 510Ks. It was ready to go because I wasn't sure which way. I was trying to convince the FDA, it's a 510K, it's a 510K. The FDA told me, no, it's a de novo. We submitted the de novo, and then the FDA said we were right. The client was really mad, blamed it all on me, hired another consultant that took my submission, submitted, and got a 510K. You know? So maybe I should have been more adamant. You definitely should have done this, but that's what happens. So somebody gets blamed whenever something gets expensive.
Yeah.
You break one, somebody's gonna get blamed.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I think that was very helpful and useful.
Yeah. And it explains the 513G a little bit to people, why we doubled the price of it from 3 to 6. It explains the importance of the 513G, but it also explains the risk that you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid the horrible situation of telling your investors, we're going down this pathway, we got all this money, and then whoops, we were wrong, and the FDA was wrong. Like, who's running the show here? Bunch of clowns?
So you're talking potentially a 4-month hang up if you do your 513G.
And the second company lost the 36 grand.
I was gonna say, and then potentially out 30
later than they would have if it had been a 510K, because both of them provided clinical data. Or one provided clinical data, one of them had simulated use data.
Wow. Sounds like a no-brainer to me. But
and all the other de novos that we've worked on, half of them have had 513s, half of them haven't. All of them have gone into the de novo, and the FDA has agreed it's a de novo, and it's gone smoothly. But 75% is not the batting average you want.
Right.
It's based on a regulation. You want to know confidently. You don't want to have a 6-month delay. You don't want to spend $36,000 you didn't need to pay. You don't want to have somebody get fired because somebody made a mistake. It's better to do that 513G. Yeah, you have to pay a small fee to the FDA. You have to pay a fee for us to prepare it. But if you do it on an hourly basis with us, there's no work that goes into the 513G that wouldn't go into the de novo anyway. But some people want a flat fee and they don't want the number to change. So fine, we'll do that, but we're not going to bet low on a flat fee.
Right.
Everybody's worried the price is going to double because it's hourly, and it usually comes out less.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10 it has been.
Wants us to do things that we don't normally do. Like, could you just write the device inscription for us? Could you write the clinical study protocol for us? Like, we specifically say you provide that. If you provide those things, then ask us for a quote for those things.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it does come up a lot. I used to have a page just dedicated to regulatory pathway analysis and some videos. But nobody ever wanted to pay for it. Everybody was like, "Oh, no, we'll do that ourselves." But then we still have clients come to us like, when is too late to do this?
I
And
had two last week come to me.
another thing that's really weird is there's actually no requirement out there to do a regulatory pathway analysis. There's nowhere in the design regs that says you have to have one.
Hmm.
Everybody does one, but there isn't a requirement to do it. Just why would you spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on development of a product you don't know which direction it's going to go?
Right, right, yep.
Is
I
it a
like I
drug?
like a roadmap. I'm not getting in the car and just driving to Canada. I want a roadmap, Same difference.
Are we flying, driving, or taking a train?
Right, exactly. Or are we walking by foot?
Yeah, the
Yep.
difference in time and money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But
Absolutely.
I think it's a really good question for a lot of companies to ask. The answer, honestly, is it's never too early.
Right.
And if you think it's a 510K or de novo, when that gray area of classification, all the more reason to do it, and all the more reason to budget for a 513G, because you
Mhm.
don't want to guess. There's too
Right.
much at stake. There's too much delay. The 6-month delay could have been $500,000 easy in sales.
Wow. So
Yeah,
that's on top of everything.
yeah. You just lost 6 months of sales. You burned money for 6 months without any revenue coming in, and you lost the revenues for those 6 months, the first 6 months of sales. So that could have been $500,000 easy, and for some
Mhm.
products, a lot more.
Yep.
But I think most startups, 500,000 is not an outrageous guess at what that lost revenues is. So
Mhm.
that decision, we're gonna save $6,000 on the 513G, and we're gonna save FTA's fees like $2,500, I think, for a small business. So you saved $8,500, but the $6,000 that we would have put on the 513G is all stuff we would have done for the de novo anyway. You're really only the only extra is the 2,500 goes to the FDA.
Yep.
And honestly, think about it. If I'm the FDA as a supervisor and I'm going to assign somebody to a 513G, that probably is going to be the same person that's going to get the pre-sub or already had the pre-sub. And it's probably going to be the same person I give the de novo or 510K to, regardless of what the answer is. Why
Yeah.
would I give somebody else if they're
Mhm.
gonna, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do assign somebody different. But that 513G is reviewed by multiple people, including senior management at the FDA, before
Yep.
letter goes out to you saying this is the classification, this is the pathway.
Mhm.
And the more exposure you have to senior management at the FDA, the smoother your submission is going to go.
Mhm.
So I think honestly, it's almost impossible to calculate, but I bet that on average, devices that have gone through a 513G have shorter review times.
That's good to know
I don't have
too.
any way of substantiating that number, but that's something the FDA should be doing. They should
Mhm.
do a study that what is the review timeline of submission that have 513Gs versus didn't, and ones that had pre-subs that didn't. And I bet you
Mhm.
there's a strong correlation between pre-subs and 513s and shorter review timelines.
Yeah. There's so many benefits, honestly.
Yep. But I understand the desire to go faster, but if you don't know where you're going, how fast will you get there?
Right. We don't want to run into a tree.
Just like that car analogy.
Mhm. Yep.
Faster to go where?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
That was a great question, and I'm glad we recorded it, and I will put that up there on
Perfect.
on the YouTube channel, and I think that'll help some people, and I'll send you the link so you can share it with other people.
Okay.
And then when they ask the question,
Perfect.
oh, I have a video for you.
Yeah.